Awesome. Well, as Iran joins and he enables his video, which he might be doing from a mobile device in a lab somewhere in Boston, we never know. But welcome, Iran, to Virtual Community Days 2020. I'm not even allowed to say you're on mute, but you are.
I'm not on mute. It's just yeah. How are you, Jonathan?
Yeah, good. I know we joked when we did the pre-show podcast, which I know the team have just pasted in, about that we keep on seeing each other on a daily basis recently, because you Perfecto have been helping MIT with the COVID contact tracing. And I must admit, I literally broke a record yesterday when I was on our weekly management call for MIT, and Dot was there, Dorothy Graham was there, and we were all onboarding people to Perfecto. So we were all showing the development team at MIT of how Perfecto works and how easy it is to get it up and running. And it was at the same time we had the virtual community days running, and I was like, oh my gosh, my context switching, or as you put in the presentation, then the parallel execution of multiple tasks at the same time is definitely not possible. But it's just an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure, and you are doing just great, Jonathan. I don't know how you do it, but you are really parallel executing, testing, everything. So kudos to you, man.
Yeah, so yesterday the record was broken, five conferences in 24 hours, one at 11 p.m. So we had this event, one at 11 p.m., one at 4 a.m. in Sydney, one at 11 p.m. in Melbourne, one in the morning, and then one in the afternoon on Eastern time, plus another continuation of the virtual community days. So it sounds glamorous, but I much prefer to be flying to those locations and
Oh yeah.
visiting them than potentially just jumping time zones. I feel like I probably, like, if Superman flies around the world, he loses a second or something. It's I feel younger from doing it. But talking about younger, and I guess the younger version of myself, I remember meeting you guys, and I was blown away back in, I think it's coming on 10 years now, when Perfecto first started, and they were, you were trailblazing the industry, right? And we did a smart city project together, and at the time it was smart cities. What is this smart city landscape of is this the future now? And 10 years ago it feels like a long time ago. And I remember sitting with you guys and Uzi, who was your head of R&D at the time, and he said, okay, we've got this smart city app which is trying to help the citizens of Copenhagen to take responsibility for their carbon footprint. And so it was doing all this really clever things about what's the most carbon neutral way to go to work, how do we gamify that so we could and I know we had from day one, we had Pete talk about gamification, but it was that idea of how do we encourage social responsibility for the city, and how tax reductions for those organizations that were really making a positive effort. And I came to you guys and I said, look, I'm stuck, right? I somehow need to emulate this ability to have all these different phones wandering around Copenhagen. And literally within a week, and I was blown away, and I think it was at Hitachi at the time, and literally you did a demo, which I've still got, and I showed the MIT guys actually, and it shows you driving all these different mobile devices. They're all wandering about in Copenhagen. And I know you talked about parallel test execution, but to me that was just like we were in the future. And you guys have gone from strength to strength to strength with these kind of capabilities. And like we said, the MIT guys were just blown away the other day using your platform for games, which is the Google and Apple exposure notification. So what's next? What's the big next thing? And don't say flip phones. We're not allowed that because it was blacklisted based on our day one.
So other than flip phones, what I think, especially for this audience, we're going to see, and we're actually starting to see, Jonathan, you just showed the previous, the latest book that, you are a key contributor to this book. I think that we are going to start seeing a more intelligent DevOps pipeline, not just testing. And you can see, from left to right, you were talking about the digital twin and other, MIT and other use cases. The world is becoming smarter. You talked about smart cities, right? 5G. So I think that, developers, DevOps practitioners are really now becoming more and more dependent on smarter technology, analyzing big data, getting decisions much faster. And, going back to my keynote, you want to have an automation you can trust. You cannot really trust it if you cannot analyze it fast. You get, I don't know, 20,000 test results in a regression cycle. Okay, how do you make sense out of this data? In like 1 hour's build acceptance test, okay? You need to be able to drill down, to filter out noise, to put or to exclude, flaky test cases, focus on the high value test cases. And this needs to be a continuous process, right? It's not just, okay, I executed my regression this week. What about next week? What about next build? Okay, so this is where I think today in 2020, developers and testers need some intelligence being fed into the process. And I think the future is full of these smart algorithms, AI, machine learning driven, to enable them to filter noise, to code much better. In the book, I'm talking about automated code reviews. Any developer that is on the call right now, in some cases, requires his peer developer, his manager to go and look at what he was committing and get this accepted. Think about an automated process that scans based on feeded algorithms and give you the go, so you can commit the code, the pull request, and move on with your build acceptance testing, integration, and vice versa. So to just summarize this long answer, smart algorithms feeding throughout the pipeline using AI and machine learning. And it's not just about testing, it's also development, AI ops, looking at production data and feeding it back to developers all the cycle.
Oh yeah, it's uncanny. It kind of answers the first question we'd had on Slido, which is Prateet, from who's also given a shout out. She's coming dialing in from India around kind of test environment issues, right? I guess we and I remember the days of having a deployment team. I don't know where they went. I think they might have got taken over by DevOps, but we used to have a dedicated deployment team who were dealing with test environments, staging environments, and quite a lot of this has been kind of taken in for granted, right? Part of it is, yes, we've got infrastructure as code, platform as code, so low code YAML kind of stuff, and therefore terraforming, part of it is it's kind of that those teams who were dedicated just to do that have kind of disappeared. And I think what you're saying there about bringing in the kind of the AI and analytics into that pipeline, or what we've I keep on renaming Richard's session to unbreakable pipeline, this idea that we can fail forwards in production. It can go and understand what the latest version is, what's potentially going wrong, and then feedback from that and self-heal itself. And these are all the pipe dreams of DevOps. And I guess the importance of your book, which is out there, is what is it in the age of DevOps that we have to start thinking about. And I remember, this time last year when we did the first virtual community days, I was working with a fashion retailer, and I'd come to you again about, this kind of telemetry in production. This idea of, well, how do I know what's going on in my React native code, right? And this kind of shift right landscape and digital twin, which was kind of early days of digital twin, I suppose, where you're kind of going, well, actually, if we can let it grow into production, we can then model it and then create a digital twin and then run all possible permutations, model-based testing using, mobile apps, and even cross-platform. So you're going between mobile to finish it off on a desktop, or there's this new digital experience. It's kind of what the second book that you wrote. First book, sorry, the Digital Quality Handbook, which again is still an absolute beautiful reference for material. So I'm going to go put the first question from Monica here and saying, what are the main challenges you've seen for creating test automation scenarios?
So I think you talked about test environment. I think first getting the access to the environment. We are in one of the most complicated years ever So test automation is difficult in every step of the way. If you just also add COVID into this mix, it becomes almost impossible, because think about it. You need to access from a local environment at home, such a sophisticated testing environment that is pre-production, that is dependent on databases and so many other uh, technologies and software. And oh, by the way, if your environment is at the office that you cannot access, and a new version was deployed and you need IT to upgrade, how do you handle that when you are just remote in your home? So I think test environment today and also in the past was always a big challenge to make sure that your test automation is relevant. Second is, unfortunately, our skills as practitioners, because whatever you knew, I know 5 years ago, isn't that relevant today. We are just around the corner with Selenium 4 and Appium 2. Selenium 4 comes with relative locators and integration with the Chrome debugging protocols and so many other sophisticated features which are beneficial to you. But if you're not able to use these features, if you didn't catch up with technology and skill set, you are behind, you are missing out. So we talked about the environment, we talked about the skill set, and last but not least is the visibility. I mentioned it with the AI angle, but really able to get the feedback to the developers upon each test automation cycle is still an issue. Okay, understanding why tests are failing and filtering out the noise and just really uh, digesting the information. Developers, we know them very well. They are impatient. They just need, okay, give it to me. Is it a bug? Is it a misunderstanding of a requirement? And if you don't have the right quality visibility, it's going to be too late, or you're going to really give the wrong feedback to the developer. So I will focus on these three. Obviously, there are much more, but these are three things that I see coming up time after time.
Yeah, great advice. And I've just been pinged by Terry because someone had the longest question in the entire world and it didn't fit on Slido. So they've actually then asked me directly. They kind of said, in reality, agile teams embrace changes during sprint. The common challenges from management is that BDD is not the right approach as it changes in requirements, as the changes in requirements and dev brings a lot of rework. What's your viewpoint? And I know I love the quantum framework, right? So I'm just going to sit there, and if I'm going to get a tattoo in 2021, it will be quantum, right? And I know Debbie from the training certification board awarded me the quantum teleplication certification a couple of years ago. But quantum is an amazing BDD framework. So how would you address that kind of question?
So it's a long question, but it's a great question. And if you go to the foundation of BDD, the three amigos, and working with business developers, testers, making sure that you're baking in the requirements while you are writing the test cases. I think if you are following the test cases in a synchronized and integrated manner, BDD can be a great tool for agile teams. I can give you a number. I have over 100 enterprise clients who are using Quantum BDD today with great success. But they're doing it so because they are keeping the sync between the business requirements, the testers, and the developers. So it's not just a siloed approach that, okay, you've written a feature file, you've written the scenario, and you're running it, and it's disconnected from the business. It's a machine, okay? Like any other software development process, it needs to be in sync and it needs to be maintained and updated as things are evolving, as Agile does, right? Perfecto is doing a 3-week sprint. We are releasing to the cloud SaaS product every 3 weeks. Okay, think about that. And we are testing. We are eating our own dog food because we support Selenium and Appium and all these things. So if Appium 2.0 is coming and we are not supporting it, right, we are missing out. So the requirement needs to be updated and the test needs to be updated as development continues. So the short answer to this long question, you need to have a validated, synchronized process between the 3 or even sometimes 4 personas that are involved in the sprint within Agile.
Yeah, and I guess building on kind of where they've been, I don't know how much of you've had a chance to watch, and thankfully a lot of this is going to be on demand now in the next few days, and also the live Q&A sessions are going to be on demand. And of course, the great thing about participating, if you're watching this uh, now on demand, was that you were able to ask the questions, and that was a great question that kind of came in and get your kind of time with the experts. But part of on top of that, we've got this kind of challenge now of all, like you said, the kind of the landscape of COVID, the speed of how we release and how quickly we release, and it's all changing. I don't know if you saw Dave Snowden's session, but there was a really good, healthy debate that kind of came in around agile and releasing, and the three amigos or the trio approach they were kind of talking about having multiple different viewpoints coming in and how this is really valuable. And I took a lot from that because it kind of derived that it's not just the three amigos. It's kind of it's not just a developer tester. It can be different people. It can be the business who or even people who aren't even familiar with the project. And I think we do kind of we've got a lot to kind of evolve in our thinking, and I know you guys have always been at that kind of forefront. And I got a question here that's kind of come in now from Mike, and Mike kind of asks around, do you have any recommendations on the best CI/CD tool? Now, I'm going to kind of break this up a little bit in the sense of, we've talked about this for a long time now, and I used to love running Perfecto as part of the CI/CD pipeline, and even with what we're doing at MIT at the moment, we're using Git, and we bake it into the workflows there and Appium. If you download the Appium tool, you can connect to Perfecto and access those devices in the cloud, and literally when you're in the cloud, you can click on a device and say, what's the connector? It doesn't matter if it's in Python, it doesn't matter if it's in another type of language. It gives you the code there and accelerates it. And I love all that. And I think a lot of even what Paul kind of mentioned yesterday was it's actually quite difficult to get into CI/CD, and it's maybe even a different discipline, right? In the sense of DevOps and the speed of change. And we've done this. And I know I've worked with you in the past with companies like Domino's across multiple different countries, where they've literally, they've wanted to spin up it to the cloud and test their application and geo-based test it, and look at improving performance, and the CI/CD pipeline and that mentality of being able to release X amount of times a day. And I know we joked about the you guys helping us on day one of the Apple Watch, right, where you literally got the Apple Watch from the App Store, get it plugged into the labs, and we were the first company in the world to actually release a product onto the Apple Watch platform. Domino's was using Perfecto as the lab to run all the tests on day one, right? And this is game-changing tech, and we're going to see Apple do that again with the AR capabilities that are going to come in the Google Glasses, where augmented reality is going to start becoming the future. And then there's a whole stack more. Just testing mobile apps. You talked in the podcast about app snippets, which are kind of coming down the line around, lighter weight. You don't have to install an app onto your phone anymore. And augmented reality, and what we're doing today with the virtual reality is, things are changing and accelerating to a point, we never foresaw, right? And I know, again, another great example, and I'm going to try and bring some of these to life a little bit when we did Pokemon Go, again using the Perfecto platform. And we were told it's impossible to test Pokemon Go, right? And we at the time, I was working for an Oxford startup company which integrated with the Perfecto stack, and we modeled out all the permutations of Pokemon, and we then used some of the stuff we'd done from the smart city to actually allow it to inject the GPX locations to move that phone around, so it genuinely thought it was walking around a city and catching Pokemon. And you might be thinking, well, what's the relevance of that? Well, first of all, the modeling the complexity, and I guess that's a lot of what Paul's talked about, is possible. And then secondly, it was one of the challenges we had, and which is why I kind of reached out to you at the time, was the Android version had different feature sets than the iOS version, right? And that's maybe slightly different now. We got React native and stuff, but so features A, B, and C were existent in the Android version earlier on Pokemon Go, if you remember the early days, than they were on iOS. So being able to test that one platform in iOS and with a separate set of rich features and rules compared to a model over in something like Android, these are incredibly complex problems. So, I know you've talked about parallel test execution. We talked about modeling. We've talked about being a bit smarter about our testing. And I kind of completely gone off Paul Mike's question around the CI/CD pipeline a little bit. But how do you deal with this kind of level of change where it's dependent on the iOS platform, the end device, the form factor, the flip phone, that how do you deal with so much change? And I'm hoping you'll have a drop for the mobile performance index, which you guys do every quarter, and is the only ebook that I download religiously. What suggestions would you have in this kind of ever-changing landscape?
So that's a good question. And if you like the index, so I personally am the one writing it for the last 5 or 6 years. I think that's the recent one came out last month, edition 13 or something. And it does relate to the question as I'm doing thorough validations globally, in Australia, India, China, Europe, US, all over the world. I'm doing validations with my clients, enterprises, small businesses. And when you do the validation, you ask the right questions, understanding what are the use cases that your clients across different verticals, because, to your point, Jonathan, I'm serving verticals that are on the automotive, right? Some of them are on the insurance and financial, and some of them are telco. Telco has a wide range of things. They care about the quality, the quality of calls and text messages performance and network reliability. When we talk about the automotive, they care about the Bluetooth, the BLE, how a device connects to their set-top box that is in the car. So we are really mimicking the box in the car, and we are hosting it in our cloud, pairing it via Bluetooth to a smartphone, to an Android and iOS. And oh, by the way, all the Android families have different support for different BLE protocols versions, right? So this is where you start building this matrix of features, supported platforms, and use cases. And you need to really, to answer the questions more specifically, when you are able to put the common feature set across the different platforms, all the Android and iOS platforms have a similar baseline. But then you have this branch of existing features that are only relevant to iOS. iOS now supports app clips, as you mentioned, right? App clips are servable through a link in Safari or a QR code or an NFC tag. But on the other hand, Android with Google are coming with APKS. APKS is not a shortcut. It actually is a native small application that does serve through the Google Play, not like the app clips. So this is where you are branching out from a common ground towards specific features. And this is how Perfecto, is building its support for different features from the common base up until it branches to these unique use cases. Just recently, we served a bank in Canada that didn't want to wait until April, May, when APKS for Android are a mandatory requirement, and they already deployed to the Google Play their enterprise app. So we started supporting this because a requirement came from the customers. So this is a digital landscape that constantly changes. New iPhones just came out, 4 different iPhones, and new iPad came out, a new Apple Watch 6 came out. These things are evolving every day, and there is the common ground, and there are these exceptional features, and we are trying to catch all of them.
Yeah, and if Paul was here, he'd be doing a watch check because he loves watches. But in our case, we do a mobile check, right? And we're both proud owners of the iPhone 12, and part of it is, like we said, it's got the radar LiDAR, the new standard, which allows augmented reality to kind of really start. So, part of it is these kind of devices change, right? So even though they brought out the 12, it was only the 12 Pros Maxes that actually had this kind of additional capabilities. Your capability sets are changing on mobile devices as well, which is why, again, I love the performance, the Perfecto Index, which you publish, because it tells you country by country what we're seeing change, what kind of devices are emerging, and like you said, then at least you've got the best idea of, well, which ones do we need to support. And
Exactly.
it's hard, right? It is still really difficult. I keep on going back to the MIT work, but even for us to just have that access to all those devices, and you can see behind me I've got a whole stack of iPhones which are all just plugged in here, because the form factor between an SE and my old form factor is completely different. So each one of those acts in a slightly different way, and that experience is really important. And there's been some really big incidents, like over here in the UK, you'll have heard about the NHS X app, which was trying to do the same thing as the MIT one for contract tracing. And they literally, if you had a mobile phone set in Spanish language, this is at the phone level, not at the the language where you select it within the app. At the phone level, if it was Spanish or it was French, you could not report your COVID, to the contract tracing. It just wouldn't work. And everyone's so quick to say, oh, well, I'll just use an emulator. But the emulator doesn't have that, the system level changes that you can do. Same as Gains. Gains requires you to go into contract tracing within the actual API and within the actual iOS, and be able to override that and add your health authority to it. So this is a new challenge, right? And like you just mentioned, the whole point with Gains is it's Google and Apple exposure notifications run by Bluetooth, right? And BLE has different frequency levels. So the reason why everyone's running around going, this contract tracing isn't effective is because each one of those has a different Bluetooth sensor device in there, all with different calibrations. That means that people are getting stranger results. Some are detecting at different ranges because of the strength of the actual Bluetooth adapter, right? So, part of it is there's so many challenges that we can't even think about, all those permutations. And then but from an industry perspective, we're still thinking, well, can I click the visual testing? Can I click, the OK button? It's like, okay, we've got a lot more to be thinking about than just the visual testing aspect. Yes, I understand there's value in the visual, but at the same time, and we're doing it at the moment with languages, right? We've released to Puerto Rico, so we've got Monica, who's actually on the asking questions today, is part of the MIT crowd testers, and she's been doing different languages and saying, well, actually, when I go in it with Spanish, the words go over the edges of things, and therefore it doesn't have the right context. People get confused and they can't onboard because it says something, but it doesn't actually mean the same, because someone's just used Google Translate and thought that was fine. So I know localization and languages is a big thing that you talked about, and you're very passionate about. And I love the story around connected cars as well. Again, another use case that we've worked together on with the Domino's app, where we had Domino's decided for some unknown reason that in the US, which was different to the UK and APAC region, that they would have the ability to order a pizza from your car. So they did this promo. They had someone driving a Ford Mustang at a very fast speed and ordering a pizza on the touchscreen on the Ford, right? And we know Ford is Microsoft embedded, or Microsoft technology, which is underneath that. And again, you've got to be able to connect to that. And we're not just talking about Apple or CarPlay or all that kind of stuff, but the whole reason why we developed that platform was when they ordered it, you wouldn't get your pizza delivered until the GPX told you that you were within range of your home, because otherwise your pizza delivery is going to get there before you do, or if you get stuck in traffic. So these pre and post experiences of waiting are very much forgotten. And I know we've got 2 minutes, and I know we've got the expert panel, which you're going to be on later, to kind of just explore this new reality. But I'm going to take one more question and probably roll over some of those into the expert panel anyway. But there's a big question there, and I'm going to ask it because I think it's important. It's something that's close to our heart, and it was close to the podcast. Was performance, mobile performance testing. We've just seen. I want to order a PS5. I know we talked about the example on Twitter where I ordered it, added it to the basket, and then as soon as I got to the basket, it wouldn't let me check out. How do you deal with performance at Perfecto, as far as give people the idea of the understanding of scale of testing mobile devices?
So that's a good question. And usually when I talk about performance, I actually split it into single user performance and performance testing which applies load on the back end, like a Black Friday, such things. So single user performance, if you take the top use scenarios, buying something on a bestbuy.com from a mobile device or the native mobile application up until the checkout, that will be a journey of a single user, and it needs to perform well across different network conditions, 5G, 4G, Wi-Fi, on a small screen, on a large screen. That's the single user performance aspect. But that's just one thing. What happens once you apply the exact same scenarios and you have, I don't know, 100,000 users accessing your backend services at the same time? So I look at mobile performance testing as a combination of single user performance, which takes the functionality of a user across different network conditions and environments and devices, of course, and then apply the heavy load on the backend to really get you the real end user experience in real time. So that will be my short answer. And we can obviously provide such a support with Perfecto. We're working with Neotis, Neoload, and other tools, Load Runner as well, to make it possible, from a backend perspective, load backend perspective, the single user performance you can apply with Perfecto out of the box very easily.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be moving on to the next speaker. Like a doctor, we're about a minute behind our normal schedule, but it's worth it. Again, I remember many, many years ago, probably 5, 6 years ago, I came to you again with another requirement, which I always come to you with really difficult requirements, which for some other reason you humor me, right? But part of it was Gap in the States said to us, oh, we're going to start using iPads for checkout, right? And I came to you and I said, I'm a bit worried. I'm worried because they're giving the iPads out to everybody, and they're using the 5G capability, the 4G, connectivity in stores in downtown LA, wherever it was. And you said, not a problem. I'll get a whole stack of devices that are on Horizon or whatever network provider that Gap were planning to use. We'll put them in downtown LA in a rack, and we'll make sure that the experience is correct, right? And I know one of my favorite functions is that kind of network virtualization, where you can emulate a poor 2G, 3G connection, and network virtualization is incredibly worthwhile. But it gave Gap that confidence that they could roll out and replace tills with, which I know we do in the Apple Store now, and we think, oh, it's easy, but some stores have not as good connectivity, right? Some don't have Wi-Fi. Some, for some other reason, share the Wi-Fi with the public as well. So it's just going to potentially add in a connection. If you want to sell something and your connection doesn't work, and you don't have the legacy till system, then you've lost revenue, right? So I think these use cases and the endless amounts of possibility are only possible with someone like Perfecto and real devices. So, again, I know we were 2 minutes over our time limit, but you're coming back for the expert panel, and then we'll put all the world to right again. So thanks so much, Eran. You're a legend in the mobile space, and it's an absolute honor. And I loved your presentation today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Have a great day. Thank you.